People used to tell me I was lucky. They looked at Daniel and me and saw a perfect marriage, one to envy, one that seemed untouched by the cracks that so often showed in other couples. We had the white-trimmed house on a quiet street, the manicured lawn, the weekend barbecues. From the outside, it was a portrait worthy of a magazine spread. But perfection is rarely what it seems. Neighbors smiled at us as we strolled hand in hand down the cul-de-sac, Daniel greeting them with charm that seemed, effortless. I smiled too, of course, because that's what was expected. What they didn't notice was the pressure of his hand against mine. Firm, guiding, never letting me stray a step out of line. Inside the house, the mask slipped. Daniel had a way of correcting me that seemed at first harmless. Not that vase, Laura. Use the crystal one, it looks more refined. Lower your voice. You come across too eager when you laugh like that. Don't serve dessert yet, it's bad hosting. Each remark was small, but together they stacked into walls around me. To anyone else, he sounded considerate, attentive. To me, they sounded like rules. Rules I was expected to obey without question. I often told myself it was nothing. That maybe this was marriage, compromise, bending, keeping the peace. But the longer I lived inside Daniel's version of perfection, the less space there was for mine. I remember a Sunday afternoon when we hosted a few neighbors for coffee. The conversation flowed easily until I mentioned wanting to visit my sister out of state. Daniel's smile never faltered, but his hand tightened on my knee under the table. Laura exaggerates, he said smoothly. She doesn't like traveling. Much, really. Home suits her best. Laughter bubbled around the table. I forced a smile, though my throat burned with silence. Later, when the guests left, Daniel turned to me. Why would you say that in front of everyone? Makes me look like I can't provide enough for you. I lowered my eyes. I didn't mean it that way. Then think before you speak. His voice wasn't raised, but it was sharp enough to slice through me. At night, lying awake, I stared at the ceiling and wondered how much of myself I had given up to keep our life looking flawless. The house gleamed, the garden bloomed. The neighbors admired us, and I felt smaller every day, like a shadow painted into someone else's picture. Daniel's breathing beside me was steady, calm, as if nothing was wrong. Perhaps in his mind, nothing was. Perhaps this was the marriage he wanted all along. A wife who fit neatly into the frame he had built. But inside me, unease stirred. I didn't have words for it yet, only a quiet recognition that something was off, something beyond ordinary compromise or care. It was the beginning of a realization I couldn't ignore forever. Our perfect facade was only a mask. And masks always slip eventually. Behind the closed doors of our perfect home, the rules were different. The smiles and laughter I wore for neighbors dissolved into silence, and in that silence, Daniel's voice filled every space. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His control came wrapped in softness and words that could almost be mistaken for care. Don't wear that color, Laura. It washes you out. The green dress brings out your eyes. Don't you want to look your best? You don't need to bother calling your sister this week. She just drags you down with her problems. Focus on us instead. Why would you think I said that? You must be remembering wrong. Each correction landed gently, almost tenderly, but beneath it lay something sharper. The suggestion that my choices, my voice, my memory couldn't be trusted. At first, I tried to push back. Daniel, I know what I heard. You told me not to talk about traveling. His brow furrowed in disappointment, not anger. You really think I'd say that? Laura, you're imagining things. Sometimes I worry about how stressed you get. The way he said it made me doubt myself. Maybe I had misheard. Maybe it was my fault after all. That's how gaslighting works. It bends reality, piece by piece, until you can't see where the truth ends and the lie begins. Friends saw nothing wrong. To them, Daniel was attentive, protective even. At dinners, he poured my wine before his own, brushed a hand across my shoulder, and listened intently when I spoke, though later he would remind me of everything I'd said wrong. You went on too long about your sister, he whispered after one evening out. People were bored. Next time, let me steer the conversation. I nodded, cheeks burning with shame. No one else had noticed, yet somehow I believed him. The isolation grew quietly. I stopped calling friends as often, afraid of saying something Daniel would later twist. I stopped wearing certain dresses, stopped bringing up subjects he disliked. Slowly, my world shrank until it fit neatly into the palm of his hand. One evening, while setting the table, I dared to ask if I could visit my mother for a few days. His knife paused above the cutting board. "Laura," he said softly. "Why? Would you want to leave me alone? You know how hard I work. Don't I deserve a wife who's here when I need her?" His words stung with guilt, and I heard myself apologize before I even realized it. At night I lay awake listening to the hum of the house. The silence pressed down heavier than any argument could. Part of me still wanted to believe this was normal, that all marriages had unspoken rules, compromises made to keep peace. But deep down I knew our silence wasn't peace. It was a cage. And in the shadows of that silence, questions about Daniel's past began to grow louder. Questions I would soon regret asking. Questions have a way of slipping through cracks, even when you try to seal them shut. For weeks I had lived by Daniel's rules of silence, but curiosity began to gnaw at me. What did he hide behind his insistence that the past was irrelevant, that the present was all that mattered? One Saturday morning, while cleaning the upstairs closet, I knocked over a box tucked deep in the corner. Its lid slid off, spilling out old papers, a wristwatch, and photographs. Most were harmless snapshots. Daniel at college, Daniel with colleagues. But one picture stopped me cold. It was Daniel, younger but unmistakably him, with his arm around a woman I didn't recognize. She had auburn hair, a bright smile, and eyes that seemed to hold something both carefree and haunting. The photo was old edges curled, but the intimacy between them was undeniable. I turned it over. A name was scribbled faintly on the back, Rachel. When Daniel came home that evening, I tried to act natural, but the photo burned in my pocket like a secret too heavy to keep. At dinner, I slid it onto the table. "Who is she?" I asked softly. His fork clattered against the plate. For the first time, his composure cracked. "Where did you get that?" "I found it while cleaning. You never told me about her." His face tightened. "It's none of your concern." "Daniel, she looks important. Why keep her hidden?" His jaw clenched. "Rachel was a mistake, that's all you need to know." The finality in his tone chilled me, but the way he refused to meet my eyes told me more than his words. I pressed gently. "Why didn't you ever mention her?" He leaned forward, his voice low and cutting. "Because the past doesn't matter. Stop digging, Laura. It'll only hurt you." My chest tightened. "Hurt me, or hurt you?" He pushed back from the table, chair scraping against the floor. For a moment I thought he might explode, but instead he laughed. Bitter, sharp. "You're imagining things again. Always looking for problems that don't exist." The familiar sting of gaslighting left me silent. Yet the image of Rachel's smile stayed etched in my mind. That night lying in bed, I studied Daniel's face in the dim light. He looked calm, peaceful even, but I knew better. His silence wasn't peace, it was armor. I tried to convince myself Rachel was just a name, just a ghost of youth that meant nothing now. But deep down, the seed of suspicion had already been planted. And seeds, once planted, don't stay buried. The following nights, I found myself listening more carefully to Daniel's late phone calls, watching the way his eyes darted when I mentioned the past. His calm veneer felt fragile now, a mask stretched too thin. I didn't know it yet, but the first whisper of Rachel's name would soon become a scream I couldn't ignore. Sleep came lightly in those days, restless and thin. Most nights I drifted in and out, listening to Daniel's breathing beside me as though the rhythm might reassure me. But one night I woke to silence. His side of the bed was cold, the sheets already cool. I sat up, straining to hear. A faint sound carried through the floorboards, a metallic scrape, then a dull thud. My heart quickened. Pulling my robe tight, I stepped into the hallway. The house was dark, every shadow stretched long and eerie. I moved quietly down the stairs, following the faint hum of the garage door, motor clicking off. The kitchen smelled, faintly of cleaning products, sharp against the night air. I pushed the garage door open slowly. Daniel stood with his back to me, shoulders tense, crouched near the workbench. The single bulb overhead cast him in harsh light, carving his figure into something sharp, almost unfamiliar. Daniel? My voice cracked the silence. He startled, then straightened quickly. Laura, what are you doing up? I woke and you were gone. What are you doing out here? He moved slightly to the side, blocking my view of the floor. Couldn't sleep. Just fixing something. But then I saw it. Past his shoulder, seeping across the concrete near the tool chest. A dark stain, uneven, glistening faintly in the dim light. I froze. What is that? Daniel's jaw tightened. He followed my gaze, then stepped squarely in front of it. Oil from the car. It doesn't look like oil, he repeated, sharper now. You're seeing things again. The finality in his tone pressed against me like a wall. I nodded quickly, forcing my voice steady. Right. Oil, he exhaled, his expression softening into something practiced. Go back to bed, Laura. You need your rest? I obeyed, though my legs shook beneath me. As I climbed the stairs, the image of the stain burned in my mind. Back in bed, I lay awake listening to Daniel's movements below. Drawers opened, water ran, something scraped across the floor. By the time he returned to bed, smelling faintly of bleach, my eyes were closed. I pretended to sleep. The next morning, I crept into the garage while Daniel showered. The corner where the stain had been was spotless. Scrubbed so clean the concrete looked newer than the rest of the floor. No oil, no trace of anything. When Daniel walked in behind me, towel slung around his shoulders, I flinched. Checking up on me? He asked. Lightly, though his eyes were sharp, He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Trust me, Laura. There's nothing here to find. His words lingered like a warning. That evening, as I set the table, the doorbell rang. Daniel's brow furrowed. We're not expecting anyone. My hands trembled against the plates. I didn't know it then, but the knock at the door would open the next crack in the life I thought I knew. The doorbell's echo still rang in my ears as I set the plates down. Daniel frowned, wiping his hands on a dish towel before striding to the front hall. I followed, heart thudding. Something about the sharpness of the bell unsettled me, as if whoever stood outside carried not just presence, but purpose. Daniel pulled the door open. A woman stood beneath the porch light, her auburn hair glinting copper in the glow. Her face was pale, her eyes sharp and unflinching. Daniel Bennett? She asked, voice steady. Daniel's grip tightened on the doorknob. Who's asking? The woman glanced at me, then back to him. My name is Melissa Carter. I'm Rachel's sister. The air thickened instantly. The name hung between us like a weapon. Rachel, the woman in the photograph. The name Daniel swore was a mistake. I took a step forward. Rachel's sister? Melissa's gaze softened on me. Yes, and I think you deserve to know the truth about your husband. Daniel's voice cut through her words. That's enough. Leave. Melissa ignored him. Her eyes locked on mine. Rachel didn't just disappear, Mrs. Bennett. Daniel knows what happened to her. He's dangerous. My breath caught. I wanted to speak, to ask questions, but Daniel's fury filled the doorway. You come to my house? Spouting lies? His voice was low, simmering. I should have known you'd still be clinging to the past. Melissa's chin lifted. It's not the past if you've never answered for it. He slammed his hand against the doorframe, inches from her face. Get out. For the first time, I saw something crack in his composure. Not just irritation. Fear. Melissa didn't flinch. Laura, you need to be careful. Rachel trusted him once too. Don't make the same mistake. Her words seared into me. Before I could respond, Daniel shoved the door closed so hard the frame rattled. He turned to me, face flushed. Don't listen to her. She's obsessed. She's been trying to drag my name through the mud for years. But Daniel, his eyes bore into me, sharp and final. I said, don't listen. Do you understand? I nodded quickly, though inside my thoughts were racing. The rest of the evening passed in silence. Daniel moved through the motions of dinner with forced calm, but his hands shook when he poured his wine. I barely tasted the food, Melissa's warning replaying again and again. Rachel. Missing. Daniel knows. Later, alone in bed. I stared at the ceiling while Daniel slept beside me. Melissa's face hovered in my mind, her eyes steady, her voice certain. Unlike Daniel's, hers carried no performance, no need for masks. If she was right, then the cracks in my marriage were not just signs of control or manipulation. They were signs of something far more sinister. And I couldn't ignore the truth forever. The next knock at the door would not be a sister. It would be someone carrying a badge. The house was unusually still the next morning. Daniel left early, claiming he had meetings all day, though he wouldn't look me in the eye when he said it. His absence should have brought relief, but instead it left a hollow space filled with unease. By mid-afternoon, the knock came. Firm, intentional, not like Melissa's hesitant arrival, nor like the casual ring of neighbors. When I opened the door, a man stood there in a dark coat. His expression was calm but focused, the kind of face that had studied too many lies to be fooled by charm. Mrs. Bennett? His voice was deep, deliberate. Detective Samuel Hayes. May I come in? Hesitated, pulse quickening before stepping aside. He entered the living room, pulling a small notepad from his pocket. I'll get right to it, he said. I'm investigating the disappearance of a woman named Rachel Carter. You may have heard her name. I swallowed. Yes, her sister. Came by yesterday. He nodded slowly, watching me. Then you know Rachel vanished about 10 years ago. No leads, no closure, until now. I gripped the arm of the couch. What does this have to do with us? Your husband, Hayes replied simply. Witnesses place him with Rachel in the months before she disappeared, and her sister insists he knows more than he admits. The room seemed to shrink around me. My voice came out thin. That doesn't prove anything. Hayes's gaze didn't waver. No, it doesn't. But I've been doing this long enough to know when someone's hiding something. Tell me, Mrs. Bennett, have you noticed anything unusual about your husband's behavior? Images flashed unbidden. The photo in the closet, the midnight stain in the garage, Melissa's warning. My lips parted, but the memory of Daniel's sharp voice, "Don't listen to her, do you understand?" choked me into silence. I can't think of anything, I said instead. Hayes studied me for a long moment. Sometimes loyalty keeps us blind, but loyalty doesn't erase the truth. He closed his notebook gently. If you remember something, call me. Sooner is better than later. He handed me his card. The weight of it in my palm felt heavier than paper. When the door shut behind him, I leaned against the wall, trembling. Guilt twisted inside me. I had lied not for myself but for Daniel, the man whose secrets were poisoning everything I thought I knew. And yet, Hayes's words lingered. Loyalty doesn't erase the truth. That night, as Daniel returned with his usual smile, I wondered how long I could keep pretending. Sooner or later, silence would break. Detective Hayes's visit lingered in my mind long after he left, his words circling like vultures. Loyalty doesn't erase the truth. That night, I could barely eat. Daniel noticed, of course. He always did. You're quiet, he said, setting down his fork. His eyes narrowed. Something wrong? I forced a smile. Just tired. But my lie was thin, and Daniel smelled weakness the way wolves scent blood. Later, when we were alone in the living room. I broke the silence. My voice trembled, but the words had to come. Daniel, a detective came today. About Rachel. His jaw stiffened. And? He said people saw you with her before she disappeared. That Melissa believes you know what happened. For a moment, his composure cracked. Then he laughed, a short, sharp sound. Of course she'd say that. She's been obsessed with me for years. And you? You believe her? I don't know what to believe, I whispered. But I saw the photo, Daniel. I found it. You told me Rachel was nothing, but you lied. His face hardened. So you've been snooping through my things. That's the real issue here. The issue, I said, voice rising, is that I don't know who I'm married to anymore. He stepped closer, his tone suddenly cold. Listen, to yourself, paranoid, hysterical, letting strangers plant ideas in your head. Do you hear how insane you sound? My throat tightened. I'm not insane. I just want the truth. The truth? His voice sharpened. The truth is that you're ungrateful. I've given you everything, this house, this life, and you repay me with accusations? Tears burned my eyes, but I held his gaze. If you've done nothing wrong, why are you so angry? Because I'm tired of defending myself against your fantasies, he snapped. Every time you imagine something, I'm the villain. Maybe you like it that way. Maybe you need me to be the monster so you can play the victim. The words struck deep, twisting until doubt seeped into me. Was I being paranoid? Had I let Melissa and the detective poison me? Daniel reached out, brushing a tear from my cheek. His voice softened, almost tender. I love you, Laura. But if you keep this up, you'll destroy us. Stop digging, stop questioning. Trust me, or there's nothing left. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to fall into the safety of his embrace and let the questions fade. But when I closed my eyes, I saw Rachel's smile in that faded photograph, and Melissa's eyes filled with warning. My marriage felt like a fire, burning bright on the outside, consuming everything inside. And I didn't know if I had the strength to put it out, or if I was already too deep in the flames. That night, while Daniel slept soundly beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. His words still echoed, but so did the detectives. If I couldn't trust my husband, I would have to search for the truth myself. And the place to start was the locked study he never let me enter. The study had always been forbidden. Daniel kept it locked, the key hidden on his ring like a secret he carried everywhere. Whenever I asked about it, he dismissed me with a smile. Just paperwork, nothing interesting. But that night, after the firestorm of our argument, the door seemed to whisper to me. If Daniel wouldn't give me the truth, I would take it. The opportunity came 2 days later. He left for work unusually early, his kiss on my cheek stiff, rehearsed. I waited until I heard his car disappear down the street. Then I went to the kitchen drawer, where I'd hidden a thin letter opener. My hand shook as I knelt at the study door. The lock was simple, the kind you might use for privacy, not protection. Still, my heart pounded like I was breaking into a vault. After several tense minutes, the latch clicked. The air inside smelled faintly of dust and leather. Papers were stacked neatly on the mahogany desk, every item in its place. Too neat, too deliberate. Daniel's orderliness was a mask, and I was about to peel it away. The first drawer held bills and bank statements. The second, insurance policies. Normal, ordinary. My breath eased until I reached the bottom drawer. Letters. Folded, worn. The top envelope bore Melissa Carter's name. Daniel, you. Can't hide from this forever. Rachel's blood is on your hands. I dropped the letter as if it had burned me. My pulse thundered as I pulled out another, then another. Each carried the same desperate plea. Admit what you did. Tell the truth. Give us peace. At the back of the drawer, a small box waited. I opened it with trembling fingers. Photographs spilled out. Rachel, smiling with her auburn hair catching the light. Rachel standing beside Daniel, his arm around her shoulders. Their closeness was undeniable. Intimate in a way that shattered his lie. Beneath the photos lay a brittle newspaper clipping. Local woman missing. Police search for Rachel Carter. Certain sentences were underlined in pen, though I couldn't decipher why. The evidence wasn't complete, but it was enough. Enough to confirm Melissa's warning. Enough to tell me that Daniel had lied about everything. I shoved the items back into the drawer and relocked the study, my body trembling. Guilt and terror warred inside me. If he discovered I'd been in there, he'd know I no longer believed his story. That night when Daniel returned home, he kissed me softly, his smile calm. To him, nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. The next step was clear. I couldn't stay silent anymore. It was time to set a trap. After finding the letters and photographs, I knew silence was no longer an option. But rushing at Daniel with accusations would be useless. He'd twist my words until even I doubted them. If I wanted the truth, I had to draw it out of him. Detective Hayes agreed. When I showed him the evidence, his expression hardened. He'll never confess to me directly, but to you, to his wife, if he feels safe, if he believes you're loyal, he might let it slip. The thought chilled me. Pretend loyalty, pretend devotion, pretend love. But wasn't that what I'd been doing for years already? That evening I set the table carefully. Roast chicken with rosemary, Daniel's favorite, candles lit, a bottle of wine breathing on the counter. When he walked, his eyes narrowed with suspicion, then softened at the sight of the meal. "What's all this?" he asked. "Just dinner," I said lightly. "We've been tense. I thought we could talk." He studied me for a moment, searching my face, then nodded. We ate in near silence at first. My heart pounded with every bite. Finally, I asked, "Do you ever think about the past?" His fork paused. "Why?" "Because, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I only know parts of you, like there are chapters missing." A smile tugged at his lips, but it was thin, forced. "The past is irrelevant. What matters is now." I reached across the table, touching his hand. "I want to understand all of you, Daniel, even the mistakes." For a long moment, he stared at me, weighing my words. Then he leaned back, sipping his wine. "There was someone. Rachel, you already know that much." My pulse raced. "What happened?" His eyes darkened, gaze fixed on the flickering candlelight. "She wanted too much. Attention. Freedom. She thought she could just leave." "And?" I asked softly, my voice steady though my insides churned. His smirk was faint but cruel. "I made sure she couldn't." The words hung heavy in the air. My chest constricted, but I forced myself to remain calm, to play my role. "You loved her," I whispered. "I owned her," he corrected. "That's the difference. Love is possession, Laura. Rachel forgot that. You won't." I swallowed hard, nodding as if in agreement, though nausea twisted inside me. Later, when the plates were cleared and Daniel drifted upstairs, I sat at the table alone. My hands trembled as I replayed every word. His mask had slipped, and what lay beneath was darker than I imagined. The man who shared my bed, who kissed my cheek in public, who neighbors admired. He had confessed without even realizing it. I picked up Detective Hayes's card from where it lay hidden in the drawer. My decision was no longer about doubt. It was about survival. Tomorrow, the truth would no longer belong to Daniel alone. I didn't sleep that night. Daniel's words replayed in my head, each one tightening like a vice. I owned her. Rachel forgot that. You won't. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, but it felt dimmer, weaker, as though the house itself knew it was built on lies. Daniel kissed my forehead before leaving for work, his lips soft, his smile practiced. I forced myself not to recoil. As the door shut behind him, I sank into the kitchen chair and stared at Detective Hayes's card. My hands trembled. I could call. I could tell him everything, the letters, the photographs, the confession over dinner. Justice was within reach. But so was ruin. If Daniel went to prison, my life would unravel. The house, the neighbors' respect, the very image of perfection I had spent years maintaining, it would all vanish in a single headline. Banker's wife betrays husband, exposes murder. And what then? Would people pity me, or would they ask how I could have slept beside him for so long, blind to what he'd done? A whisper of doubt crept in. Hadn't I seen the signs all along? Hadn't I chosen silence? By afternoon, Hayes himself returned. Hayes himself. He stood in the doorway, his expression calm but searching. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, "we're close. Witnesses have come forward. If you can corroborate, we can bring Daniel in. He won't escape this time. My mouth went dry. I wanted to speak, to tell him everything. Instead, the words tangled in my throat. What happens if you arrest him? Justice, Hayes replied firmly. Rachel's family deserves answers, and you deserve freedom. Freedom. The word should have sounded sweet, but instead it rang hollow, because freedom meant admitting that my marriage, the very foundation of my life, was a cage. I nodded slowly, promising to call him if I remembered anything. But when I closed the door, I felt his disappointment linger like a shadow dot. That night, Daniel returned home earlier than usual. He wrapped his arms around me, his breath warm against my neck. I knew you wouldn't turn on me, he murmured. You're stronger than that. His words chilled me. Did he know I had spoken to Hayes? Or was he simply confident in the hold he had over me? As we sat down for dinner, he poured the wine and smiled as though nothing had changed, and maybe nothing had. Maybe that was the truth that terrified me most. Later, lying beside him in the dark, I stared at the ceiling. The choice weighed heavy: love or justice, protect him and live with the secret, or betray him and tear down everything I had built. Daniel's breathing was steady, almost gentle. In that moment, he looked like the man the neighbors adored, the man who built me a home, who held my hand in public, who whispered that he loved me. But beneath that image lay the truth. He had taken a life, and he would take mine too, piece by piece if I let him. I turned onto my side, facing the wall, tears soaking into the pillow. When morning came, I knew I would have to choose. Would I dial Hayes and deliver my husband to justice? Or would I smile through another day, another lie, protecting the man who destroyed everything he touched? The house creaked around me, the silence suffocating. Somewhere deep inside, I realized the cruelest truth of all. Whichever path I chose, a part of me would not survive it.